Welcome to the Chapter 3 Stigma podcast. This podcast was created to be there for any individual who feels that they are at a low point in life and are confused, seemingly alone, and helpless in their situation. I am a recovering alcoholic, and I felt this way too, until I sat across a table from another addict who shared his story and made me realize that I was not alone in my struggles. My life was saved by this realization, and I hope to help anyone struggling by sharing my story to show you that you are not alone and that life can contain unbelievable riches and meaning. Welcome. I am glad you are here. When I heard about our opportunity to connect, really within the first minute of digging in and looking into Hushabye Nursery, there were multiple reasons that I wanted to talk to you. And so I think I just kind of wanted to start with that. The first is there is forever in my heart a place for individuals that work in the NICU. Every single person that we encountered in our time in the NICU just had an amazing care, compassion, and like this beautiful and perfect type A personality that I, as a parent, and my wife as a parent, needed in that moment. So it just like, it really opened up my eyes to this whole new world and just like this level of just love that exists between the care staff and the baby, the care staff and the parents and the family. It's just incredible. And so anyone that has experienced her time in the NICU, I'm like, that's a special person. I want to spend time with them. I want to talk to them. Further, this specific area in which you work in which Hushabye Nursery specializes, I feel like is a stigma within a stigma. Within the world of addiction, there is like this almost deeper, darker space that no one wants to talk about. People just kind of cast shame over, and it is really unfortunate. And I actually have an experience in my past that I'm embarrassed about. And to give you a little background on it, my younger sister is a labor and delivery nurse at an inner city hospital, and they see a lot of difficult cases. She does not talk about work very often. I know that she has very hard days, and there was one moment, and one time in particular, where she opened up about a patient who came in and they did a drug test and they found a significantly high BAC. And so she was talking about the process of delivering that baby, and my reaction, and this is when I was struggling with alcoholism myself and I was in the throes of it and I was in despair. My reaction to that story was, well, they took that baby away and did not give it back to the mother, right? And to have that level of judgment coming from someone who themselves was struggling and who knew they were struggling, it hurts me. It hurts me to say, but I also can kind of see and recognize like that is the stigma that exists within the stigma of addiction.
Yeah.
So I am very excited for this conversation and just kind of want to open it up to you. Can you describe what work Hushabye Nursery does and give a little background on your experience and what really led you to the development and creation of this incredible organization?
Yeah. Hushabye Nursery serves pregnant and parenting families that are struggling with opiate use or have a history of opiate use. So they may be in recovery, but prescribed a medication, methadone, Suboxone, Subutex, Vivitrol, that their baby may still withdraw from those symptoms. So we meet families where they're at. They're struggling, if they're not, if they're, well or unwell, we're not there to judge. Hushabye was started. I'm a neonatal nurse practitioner, and so I worked in the NICUs for almost 30 years. And 2015, we started just seeing an influx of babies coming in withdrawing. And that was not my cup of tea. I like taking care of the babies at the size of a dollar bill. I love that adrenaline rush. I didn't want to care for a baby that was going to cry my entire shift. And I definitely did not want to care for families that I don't think the words ever came out of my mouth, but I know that I looked at them and said, I can't believe you didn't stop. If you loved your baby, why would you not stop?
Yeah.
And, so initially when I created Hushabye, it was because babies did well in a dark, quiet environment with certain nurses at certain times of the day. Ended up finding one well, it was three families, two families that were in recovery, probably a couple weeks, maybe a month apart, that told me in the neonatal intensive care unit that they were not going to go home that night. And it was two different times. They said, because that nurse is working again and you're going to give my baby more morphine between 2 and 5 a.m. I was like, no. We're not going to. Talked it through, and I was like, that's not what's going to happen. I wasn't on that night shift. By golly, it happened. And their concern is we're never going to get out of here.
Yeah.
And then finally, the third parent that said this was an adoptive dad. So you go, okay, look at that unconscious bias. I listened to the two moms and dads kind of sort of that were well, but their babies were withdrawing from, I think, methadone, and one was methadone exposed and one was Suboxone. I listened, but I didn't do anything. And then this adoptive dad that we had actually worked with them a year before, so I really knew him. He had been, I think, with us for almost 2 months with the first baby, and then they were adopting a second baby with us, and I knew him, and very calm demeanor, just the sweetest man ever. And he came in and he goes, "I'm not leaving tonight." And I'm like, there's no place for you to sleep. I mean, we don't have space in here for you to stay. And he's like, they had a 1-year-old in a hotel, and their baby, he said, every night with this nurse combination, my baby gets morphine. And he's like, we'll never go home. And I said, I'm working a 24-hour shift. I'm on. You go home or go to the hotel. I promise if you can be here within 30 minutes, I will not give your baby morphine until you get here and you agree that we need to give your baby morphine. And so, by golly, he agreed, and he and the family went back to the hotel. And 2:30 in the morning, the nurse calls, very just crabby, and I walk in the door, and she's like, "You need to give that baby morphine." And I said, "Well," and just the energy in the room wasn't good. Babies are crying; it's just ridiculous. I go and pick up the baby, and he has beads of sweat on his face. Okay, for a baby to have that, a newborn, that baby's been crying for a long time. And I'm trying to get him settled, and the nurse is like, what dose do you want to give? And I said, we're not giving a dose right now. I promised the dad that we would call him. I said, I need you to call him. And she was so just frustrated with me. Called dad, and I tried to do all my little tips and tricks and that I knew at that time, and it wasn't going well. This baby was just arching, stiff, screaming. It was horrific. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going to have a seizure, because that's the worst thing that can happen for a baby that is withdrawing. And I'm like, I told dad I'd wait for 30 minutes, but this is really, really bad. And I mean, the other babies were crying. The nurses were just, it wasn't good. And I said, you know what? I'm taking baby to my call room. So I broke the rules, went across the hall, went into my call room, made it completely black. I'm like, just shut everything down. And I'm in there and I can feel myself, this baby screaming, arching. I'm trying to settle him and I'm just like, shoulders up. I can tell that I'm tense. And at the time I was practicing yoga a lot and, kind of meditation and whatnot. I'm like, Tara, you've got to get crap together. Take a deep breath, get yourself, in it and realize that this baby's feeding off you. And so I took this deep breath and I held it and I'm like, okay. And when I did that, the baby paused. And I was like, okay. Then he started crying again. And I'm like, Terry, you're still anxious. Take another deep breath. And I held it and the baby paused. And then he started crying again. And I can feel myself like getting back. Oh, okay, I'm getting it together again. By the time I did 3 deep breaths, I was better. And baby, I interrupted him 3 times. And you could tell it was starting to calm. And so then with my babies, I always did this like little kind of bounce thing with, you're holding them and I'm like, okay, what did I used to do? I used to bounce. And I'm like, okay, bounce. And I'm trying to do that. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting somewhere. And you can tell that he's crying, but not as hard. And then one mom had explained to me that they have tummy aches when they're withdrawing. And I'm like, well, when I withdraw, when I have a tummy ache, I go in that fetal position. And so I'm like, what if I flip the baby around, not do chest to chest, and I hold his knees to his chest, and I'm doing this bounce thing? I'm like, maybe that will work. Because I'm waiting. I told Dad I would wait 30 minutes, and we're still, baby's still having a hard time. And I flip him around, and I'm slowly, slowly, slowly able to get the knees to the chest, and he's starting to decrease his cry. And I'm like, okay, so let's do this little bounce. And I started making the bounce. He did better when I went deeper. And now we call that bounce a squat. So you're actually doing a squat up and down. But I flipped him around and then I'm like, okay, well, I know somebody said do these shushing noises.
Mm-hmm.
And it's supposed to be mom's heartbeat and whatever. So I'm like, shh, shh, and I'm all by myself, completely black, and I can feel him starting to go and relax over my hand. And I'm like,
Wow.
okay, my legs are tired. I'm like, oh no, you just keep going. And I'm getting somewhere and I can feel him starting to relax and he's quiet. And Dad probably came at about 20 minutes, but it seemed like it was longer than that.
Mm-hmm.
And when he knocked on the door very gently, because he, I'm sure, could not hear any crying, I opened the door and his baby was sleeping in my arms.
Wow.
And he's like, I'll be in the nursery. And I'm like, yeah, just let me be. Let me be.
Wow.
And that baby slept for 3 hours in my arms in a
Oh my
quiet, dark
gosh.
environment. And so then I started doing it more. And it really was with like specific energy in the room, specific combination of nurses, doctors. It was just very, very interesting. Baby would have a great day and an awful night, or an awful day and a great night with certain caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was frustrating when you saw that. And so then when they would call me and want to give a dose, I'm like, no, I'm going to take baby in the closet, which in another NICU that I was working, I was like, let's go in the closet. And took him in the closet. It was a big closet. And I started doing the same thing. And found out 4 or 5 babies later, it's working. And I'm not having to give a dose. And
amazing.
I was like, And then my co-founder was watching the Today Show, and Lily's Place in West Virginia had taken their babies out of the neonatal intensive care unit because they didn't have room in this tiny city. And they put them in just a specific place for babies that were going through withdrawal. And they were on there saying, my gosh, it actually worked. So we went out, visited. We were like, oh my gosh, we're going to do that in Arizona. And 5 years later, and learning a lot more about trauma-informed care, bonding, attachment, adverse childhood experiences, really having that aha moment of, if I don't get this family system well, this baby's going to go to foster care, probably be raised in foster care for his life. And 15, 16 years down the road, we're going to have a baby from this child is going to have a baby, and we're just going to have this continued generational trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And 5 years later, we opened our doors November 2020, 12-bed nursery here in Phoenix. We've now served 933 babies.
Wow.
That we are able to get families well. And when I say babies well, but families well, average length of stay for a baby in the neonatal intensive care unit that's withdrawing is 22 days. New data, there was new research, one research study that said 16 to 18 days. For us to get our babies through, it's 8.5 days. And we look at reimbursement, or we look at readmission rates. Out of 933 babies, we've had 2 readmissions. And
whoa.
Those readmissions, both of them came back to us, and both it was the caregiver. The caregiver was not mom. The caregiver was just anxious, and that literally both babies looked great the next day. And I'm like, just keep them one more day, because maybe it really was just a great night, and we sent them home the next day. And so we know that quiet, dark environment with trauma-informed providers, one-to-one care, and really with the end goal of is healthy mom, dad, healthy baby, and as long as it's safe, family unification is our goal. And when we meet families where they're at and understand that this can be that pivotal moment, babies, are the firecracker to many, many families, many of our families going, you know what, before I couldn't do it, but I have to do it now.
Yeah.
And what we found is we're not the typical behavioral health organization. We provide standard outpatient services for moms and dads. But what we find is when you don't do typical behavioral health and you just help them learn how to parent safely, as they're learning how to parent safely, they're being mentored by a lot of our peer supports. We have 3 that have been through our program. Awesome. That are now raising their kids, and they're able to go, how did you do it? Mm-hmm. And as they're learning how to care for their baby, then they're going, okay, well, if you did it, where did you go? What recovery?
Yes.
What was, what's methadone? When you said stigma inside stigma, we'll have people that are struggling with fentanyl use that are like, oh, there's no way I am going to go and get prescribed methadone. I'll never get off methadone. Yep. And I'm like, okay, so it is the gold standard of treatment. Mm-hmm. This is what you need to do, but there is stigma upon stigma.
Yeah.
Even in the community that struggles.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's incredible. And I want to hit on the stat that you gave, and then touch on one more, just to talk about what our general current standard model of care looks like right now. But 8.5 days for Hushabye Nursery versus 22 days in the NICU. As a parent who has been in the NICU before, the hours, the days are, it's almost indescribable about how taxing it is as a family, how you are just desperately wanting to see your child grow and heal. And those days take tolls on relationships, on families. And it's just like I'll be honest, to have even a single day delta, and that is meaningful, and that really is. It's so hard to describe if you haven't been in there, but that's an incredible outcome. And the other one that I wanted to hit on, and then talk about like what our standard approach is, broadly speaking, a treatment rate using morphine of 98% in the NICU versus with Hushabye Nursery, 42%. That is a massive delta. And so I thought, can you just describe, like, one, why is morphine kind of the standard care for these infants that are in this situation, and why in our general NICU practice is there such a high rate of use and going to that medication?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm going to give you one more step before we go there. So
Perfect.
if babies come to us not prescribed morphine, so they come to us before they've escalated,
Mm-hmm.
less than 8% get a single dose at Hushabye.
Wow. Wow.
Less than 8%.
So in that 42% are babies that have already come to you being on morphine, and then you have to follow a protocol to
Correct.
bring them off or bring them down. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I would never, as a nurse practitioner, I would never have thought. It's still hard to believe. Initially, we did our initial data with 9 babies, and now we're 900 babies, and the
Yeah.
data's the same,
That's
exact same.
that's
And
wild.
so, yeah, and so it's really crazy. But so morphine in the neonatal intensive care unit, I mean, they're withdrawing from opiate use. You do
Mm-hmm.
not want them to have a seizure. That would be, brain development and us impacting that. So that is how we treat them. When they come into the neonatal intensive care unit, they're frantic, they can't eat, they're throwing up, they have increased tone, they won't sleep, all of those things. When you're looking at that, it's like, how do you make them feel better? You give them a dose of morphine because that's what they're missing. If you
Yeah.
ask anyone that struggles with opiate use disorder, someone that struggles with opiates, as soon as they take something, an opiate, they are immediately better.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yep.
And so that is just how we've done it. And in the hospital, we don't have one-to-one caregivers.
Right.
So, when I said that nurse was so upset with me, she had 2 other babies in her
Right.
assignment, and
Right.
probably 2 other babies that were withdrawing. So
Mm-hmm.
she's supposed to take care of 3 babies that are screaming. Who wants to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, people that go into the neonatal intensive care unit like the adrenaline rush.
Mm-hmm.
We do not like when you say type AAA. I mean,
Yeah.
we got
Yeah.
it down,
Yep.
what we like. And for some reason, like, my love changed in there. I don't know how, why. Now I don't ever want to take care of a baby that weighs less than a pound.
Mm-hmm.
That is not what I want to do. But somewhere it's just your niche and your season of life
Mm-hmm.
that helps these babies. And so what we go by is a different care model called Eat, Sleep, and Console. So in most neonatal intensive care units, they practice or they assess a baby by a modified Finnegan scoring system, which is greater than 20-point scale. That's very subjective. There's not tons of objectivity. That you get a score of 0 if you're showing no symptoms of withdrawal, but some symptoms of withdrawal can be normal. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
for a baby that's not exposed could score on this system.
Yep.
And if you get a score of greater than 8, that means, baby's, escalating. We probably need to give morphine. If they have 3 times that it's 8 or above, so total, adding that up, once you get a score of 24, you're supposed to give a dose of morphine.
Mm-hmm.
And in the hospital, what we do is once we start it every 3 hours for the most part.
Okay.
Now, probably 4 years ago, there was a doctor out of California that said, you know what, if there's such variability, not tons of validity to that tool, could we just look at, can they eat, can they sleep, and can they be consoled? If they can eat an ounce, if they can sleep for an hour, if they can be consoled within 20 minutes, do you really need to give morphine? And is there going to be any adverse side effects? And what they found was you don't have to give as much morphine.
Yeah.
And so, this is about the same time that we're thinking about we need to open Hushabye. Well, the issue with the Eat, Sleep, and Console model in most institutions that are even doing Eat, Sleep, and Console, the only time that families qualify that for that program is if they have two caregivers, meaning, you know, mom and dad can take turns because somebody's got to sleep in there.
So, yep.
You have to be well, so you have to be prescribed methadone or MAT. If you don't have that, then you don't qualify. And so at Hushabye, what we do is we have trauma-informed caregivers, meaning all of my staff have chosen to work with this population for some reason.
Yep.
They've gotten in there. Many have had addiction impacted in their lives. We have many that are in recovery themselves. They know the stigma that goes along with it. Yeah. Everyone goes through intensive training, not just on how to care for baby, but how to care for mom and dad.
Yeah.
With, again, that ultimate goal of family unification is what we want. And what we find is, and I always tell everyone when I'm giving tours of Hushabye, I'm like, think of, like, if you were a mom and or dad, you have babies. And when I have babies, you know, you have to go to work and they wake up and they have a fever and I was this nurse that gave them Tylenol and I sent them to daycare and acted like I didn't give them Tylenol. Never admitted it, didn't do anything. I was like, there you go, you're going. But who did that baby want? My baby wanted me when they didn't feel well. And babies do better with their moms and dads when they don't feel well. And so having a behavioral health component, understanding where the moms and dads are, and having staff that are able to care for moms and dads and babies as a dyad or a triad together is a completely different care model. Medical meeting behavioral health and meeting the needs of that family system is just something that we don't do in the neonatal intensive care unit. And so many of those babies are in the neonatal intensive care unit without their parents. And without their parents because we don't welcome them in. And I'll tell you one not good story, and it's one that made me go, gosh, we can do better. We should do better, and people should demand that we do better. I was in the nursery one time, and we were trying to start Hushabye, and I'm in there. There's a baby that had a really rough night. He finally had fallen asleep, and he's in his bassinet. Mom comes in, and back then heroin was what most people were struggling with. Now it's fentanyl. But it was heroin, and mom wasn't well. But mom came in, and she was not under the influence that you could tell at that time. And she comes in, and when you go into the NICU, you have to wash your hands and, you know, make sure that you're clean before you go over. And in this tiny little NICU, it was just 6 beds, and they're all in the same room. She walks in, she's washing her hands, she's looking over her baby, big smile, and I'm there with the nurse, and the nurse looks at her and points at her and says, "Don't touch your baby." Ugh. And mom's washing her hands, and that smile went you know, she's taken aback, almost crying, but not crying. Yeah. And she goes and sits down by her bed, or by the baby's bed, does not touch. I mean, she's just like, I'm just going to sit here. That was, you know, I can't even imagine what was going through her mind. So I went over and I'm like, I cannot believe number one, that the nurse did it in front of me, but number two, that she said that. Right. And I'm like, what she meant was, your baby just fell asleep. He had a tough night. He's going to need you when he wakes up. He'll probably wake up in 15 minutes. Please stay, because he's going to need you. Well, she stayed. 30 minutes later, baby's still sleeping. She's just staring at him. Like, just, you could tell, trying not to cry. And she's just staring at him the whole time. And I go back over and I'm like, oh my gosh, he must know you're here. Stay. He's not slept this good. This is amazing. Please stay. So she stayed for another half an hour. And that day when she left, she never touched her baby. And she never came back. And in that situation, we become providers or nurses, doctors, to care for people. And gosh, we could have done better. We could have got that mom well. She showed up, and instead of us looking at it, she showed up.
Yeah.
We looked at it, oh my God, she's here.
Yeah.
Instead of going, she showed up, she loves her baby, she was so excited to see him, and she never came back. And that baby would be, I think it was 8 years ago is what I think we were. And he maybe he's in foster care, but
Yeah.
we had no idea. There were no other family connections. That little one was by himself.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I can't speak to it in that specific scenario, but I know, having exposed myself when I was struggling with my alcoholism, and if there was an engagement or a scenario where it's like I'm drunk or I'm detoxing and I'm aware of it and I know it, and I'm fearful and I'm hopeful that no one calls me out on it, that no one sees it, and I just kind of want to be in that situation and like live to. I just like, it happened to me a few times where it's like you get that call out, and the fear and the anxiety that just rages through you as the addict. And I'll be honest, like in my situations, it's just like I wanted to run, I wanted to get away, and I never wanted to show my face in that situation again, because I was then fearful about what was talked about, who's thinking what about me. And just to imagine, I mean, I had situations like that with my son as a father, right? Where, and, but just to think about being in that NICU space with a child who is working on getting well. Yeah, that is hard. And that is like, that's the problem with the stigma.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, you had mentioned something, and I've read it in numerous places. Like 2015 seemed like a pivotal moment or time with regards to your building and budding idea and kind of like thought of a solution, plus like this high influx of children or infants with NAS. From your perspective, is there anything that was unique about the Phoenix area or even nationally that was going on in 2015 that led to just that, what seems like an explosion in cases that were coming into the NICU?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, the opioid crisis started about 2010 when you look at data,
Mm-hmm.
that it exploded. And I honestly just think it was ignorance. I
Yeah.
think that we just ignored it. This is not a priority for us in the neonatal intensive care unit. When I noted in the tiny little neonatal intensive care unit that I was working in, I transferred from like almost 100-bed NICU to a small NICU because I needed to be closer to home for my kids. They were in
Mm-hmm.
high school, they just needed more stuff. I'm like, this is what I need to do right now.
Yep.
We called it dosing for dollars because you didn't have to work really hard. It kind of was really, really boring.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found was that out of that 6-bed unit, we'd have 5 or 6 babies withdrawing at the same time.
Oh,
And
jeez.
this is a hospital close to where I live. And I'm
Yeah.
like, where are these people coming from? Because this is not in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
And then I called the hospital that it came from, and I'm like, how many babies do you have there withdrawing? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, no, I need you to count how many babies you have withdrawing. And they got on the phone and they're like, we have 12. And so I called another NICU, and I would call the NICUs just around us, just in the East Valley, so the eastern part of Phoenix area, and we'd have 18 to 24 babies at any given time. And I was like, we just don't care. Like, we literally just go, okay, start my morphine. I guess they're going to be here for a month or two, and do the protocol. This is what we do. But they weren't going to die. I mean,
Yeah.
they're not. So it wasn't even stigma just to the parents, kind of stigma to the baby.
Yeah.
And you want to
Right.
go, that's bad.
Yeah. And the standard protocol in the NICU would be, do you start them at a certain dose of morphine? I think you had said every 3 hours, and then over the course of days and weeks, you are slowly stepping that down. Are you continuing to do it on a 3 hour cycle?
No, usually it's like every 48 hours that you would
Oh,
wean.
okay.
And you'd
Okay.
go by 10 to 20%. Have we in the NICU, my peers, have they gotten more aggressive with weaning? Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure they look at their length of stay compared to my length of stay,
Yeah.
and they're
Yeah.
like, "We got to move.
Yeah.
This does not look good." But if you asked any of my peers that still work in the hospital, where should the babies go? They should come to us. But unfortunately, judgment, stigma, policy, money, all comes down to administration, whoever,
Yep.
just not being on board to always transfer the baby to us to get the gold standard of care.
Yes.
If it is what you would demand of your baby to be cared for
Yeah.
at Hush.
And
Yeah.
I want to go back to this eat, console, sleep model, and specifically a question or potentially around policy. So you had mentioned, like, they did this study, this eat, console, sleep model comes out as like, hey, we should really pay attention to this. We should look at implementing it. However, you mentioned, like, there were real restrictions that in the grand scheme of things kind of filter out and exclude the primary target, where these families that need this type of assistance and care with their child are not even going to be able to receive that care. Their child is not going to receive that care. Is that a hospital policy? Is that something with insurance that makes it such that the hospitals would not permit a family that's, say, has mother and or father who is using or on Suboxone? Like, what's the reason there?
Yeah, it definitely not insurance. Insurance
Okay.
sees that data. They want the family system together. I believe that insurance companies see, that worth, that if you have parents involved, length of stay is going to be less, which means it's going to cost them less. So I believe that it's not the insurance companies. I think it's stigma of, um, you know, you can educate. And if you're stubborn, meaning, nurses, doctors, administrators of hospitals, I mean, just whoever it is, social workers, case managers, all you need is one
Mm-hmm.
person to go, no, we're not doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That baby's not going to get the care that they need, nor is the
Mm-hmm.
family. And so I think also we're scared as providers to care for people that struggle with substance use.
Hey, folks, I just wanted to drop in with an ask for help. If you're enjoying and finding value from this episode, please take a moment to leave a 5-star rating and a written review. Whether this episode is allowing you to connect with the struggles that a loved one may be going through, or allowing you to see yourself through the story of someone else, the ratings and reviews allow the work to be made more readily available for those who are searching for a solution. Love to you all for the incredible support of this work and the meaning and hope that it provides. Yeah.
We, in nursing, when I went to nursing, I didn't get any education on, even on alcoholism, I didn't get education on that. We didn't understand adverse childhood experiences, had no idea what those are, which is ridiculous because the huge study that came out in before 2000, why do nurses not understand that, making a family system not be cohesive is probably going to continue this generational trauma, addiction for years to come, for
Right.
generations to come.
Right.
And the fact that those aren't focuses in medical or nursing, I think we're still going to just keep seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we would bring behavioral health This is what I really wish. I wish behavioral health was more important than mental or than medical health. So,
Hmm.
like we're supposed to go and do our annual exam with our doctor. How
Yep.
come we're not made to go see our therapist annually?
Yeah.
Why is
Right.
that not? Because our mental health leads to physical health.
Yep. Yep.
If you're challenged, you're going to be sick.
Yep. Absolutely. And I mean, I look at it in terms of my struggle with alcoholism, and it was so symptomatic focused. And for me, what that meant was don't drink, just don't drink. Right.
Yep.
But it took me 12 years of a lot of struggle, of a lot of knowledge seeking and searching to actually realize like, hey, there's a layer deeper than just don't drink. And it was only through the pursuit and work in that field, which was, to your point, it's like an entirely different realm of healing and focus that you need to take. And it takes so many just like one-on-one conversations, like personal action that I mean, our medical system is big. It's seen a lot of people, and it's also, I'm going to say kind of like conservative in that it's slow. It's seemingly slow to change and adapt. And so when you started seeing this, did you see like, and you were driven to do something, did you see your options as like, I need to either influence change inside my hospital here and just kind of like grind it out that way, or I need to step away and just create something that is entirely focused on this? Or were there other options that you were considering?
Yeah. We tried, like my co-founder and I tried, in the hospital, tiny little NICU to change culture
Yep.
and treatment, and there's just no buy-in. There was no buy-in by
Yeah.
nurses, by doctors, by administration. No, you can't have staffing for that. No, you can't bring volunteers in for that. I mean, it just wasn't going to work. And then we heard about Lily's Place, and we were like, okay, we're just going to do that. And honestly, Lily's Place made it sound like it wasn't that big a deal. Like, oh, you just get a building donated. Oh,
Yeah. Right.
when how do you get reimbursed? And
Mm.
I mean, now I really kind of call, like sister facilities across the country, working to do very similar work. We don't do the exact same work, but
Hmm.
serving the same population in different ways. But it's crazy when you see that you're hitting barrier after barrier after barrier in the
Yeah.
hospital that you go, okay, let's just do this. And so I think had I known how difficult, how many times I would have been told no, how many, barriers I hit early on, there's no way I would never even taken it on.
Yeah.
But early on, I had one person tell me I couldn't do it. My husband still curses that guy's name, because he's like, "Oh, he should never have told you no."
You just took it
And
on.
yep, and I was like, and every time I'm ready to go, gosh, we can't do it. And I remember that mom and that baby.
Yeah.
Remember what he said, that dude said,
Yeah.
and just went, you know what? If we're doing what's right, and if it were my baby, I would demand, like,
Hmm.
I would not accept my baby not being transferred to Hushabye. I,
Hmm.
I, I wouldn't. I'd be like, okay, I'm going to take baby myself and bring them to Hushabye. I don't care what you say.
Yeah. And how do families generally find out and connect with you and get into your organization?
Yeah. For the most part, like the recovery community.
Okay.
So a lot of the medication assisted treatment programs for the methadone
Hmm.
providers, Suboxone providers, they know about us and they'll do
Hmm.
that referral. The word of mouth and word on the street is huge and growing.
Yep.
And then a few come from obstetricians and the medical community, but it's not where it should be.
Hmm.
We were talking yesterday to a pair, trying to like improve referrals, and I said, I have 6 open beds right now. I said, I'm sure if you call your people, you have at least 6 babies
Hmm.
that could come to me. And yeah, they did. She called.
Oh,
I mean,
that's incredible.
she was texting people, and she's like, "Yep, I do have that many babies."
That's
Um,
amazing.
and I was like, "Huh, look at that." And she was like, "I will investigate and see what's going on." So I told my uh, inpatient and nursing coordinator and said, "Just so you know, you might be full tomorrow."
Yeah, I
um,
love it.
but it's having that awareness and um, just the drive to do what's right. And when you look at the data, and when you see families that honestly, I thought there's never, no way they're ever going to get well,
Yep.
and they do. And we have 3 peer supports right now that have been through our program. 2 moms and a dad that are raising their babies. Um, they One of our peer supports was a peer support to one of our other peers.
Oh,
And
wow.
so when you go, okay, now you both work for us, and we're actually looking at another one that was in that realm that they've all worked for, you
Hmm.
go, the program works. And
Hmm.
to see them with their kids and they're thriving, it's what's right.
And I'm very curious about this from your perspective as an employer. You choose to employ recovered addicts. Why do you
Mhm.
do that? And how do you think about, again, many employers think, well, there's a downside here. Relapse is something that's always on people's minds, especially non-addicts. When they're looking at a recovered addict, it's kind of like, well, are you just waiting for the shoe to drop? So how do you approach that as an employer?
I think I'm always a glass half full.
Hmm.
Always, always, always. So I think there's that. But then I see, proof that they succeed. I also really look at opiate use disorder or substance use disorder as a brain disease, not a
Hmm.
moral failure.
Hmm.
So their brain just doesn't, I mean, it's been impacted by substance use. And so I always tell moms and dads that you have a brain disease, and your brain disease is healed by um, being prescribed methadone or Suboxone. And then I tell them, I'm like, and this is too much information, but about myself, I have brain disease. I take medication every single night. I
Hmm.
will for my entire life.
Hmm.
And usually I'm like, okay. And I, in my head, this is truly how dumbed down I make it. Um, Nobody ever, ever, ever judges me for having epilepsy. Everybody goes, oh my God, you have epilepsy. I'm so sorry.
Yep.
Someone with opiate use disorder, substance use disorder that's struggling, we're like, oh my gosh, you're an awful person.
Yep.
And and it's not that. And so hiring those that work for us, number one, they're fabulous. They're
Hmm.
able to share their stories. They have
Yes.
compassion. Usually don't have stigma. Sometimes you see stigma upon stigma. I
Yeah.
can't say that the always is it great. Um, they're hard workers.
Hmm.
I it almost we were saying we hired someone recently that we didn't know had a history, and we were doing our like 90-day check-in, and they were saying, what do you like most, what do you whatever, and he goes, I like most that I don't have to hide my past. He goes, I
Yeah.
never told you guys that I struggled. I
Hmm.
never said anything. And here it actually is a bonus. And I'm like, yep, if you tell me you have history, it does give you like a leg up on,
Yeah.
when if it was 2 different people and you're equal on all things, and I have someone that has a history, I'm probably going for that person.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible what sort of hope it can inspire connecting with someone that you realize has traveled the road that you are on, and where you feel hopeless.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, and where you feel a deep sense of shame. And that's actually one thing that I'm curious about. How in your process, either right at the moment of intake, or throughout the days of care that you provide to the families, how do you deal with and address parents that do feel shame?
Every one of them feels shame.
Okay,
Every
yeah, yeah.
every single one of them. So um, we do a lot of onboarding with our staff, with our volunteers, everybody trauma informed. That is it. And the very first word from anyone that works for me or volunteers, when they meet a new mom or dad, congratulations is the very first word that they
Wow.
say.
Wow.
No matter what. And when you do that, you break down the walls, and they look at you and go, did you seriously just tell me congratulations?
You're not going to judge me?
Yeah. And us going, I mean, the next thing I tell my staff, I'm like, you find something cute on that baby and you point it out.
I love that.
Even if the baby's not cute, you like the left earlobe is amazing. You know, but making them feel welcomed and building them up. We do that, we do that education with our staff of, we don't need to knock them down anymore. They're already knocked down. They're seeing that their baby's withdrawing because of choices that, well, some I wouldn't even say choices. Many people that have opiate use disorder were prescribed medications by us in the medical field.
And then the prescriptions run out and they go seeking.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. And the shame of, I can't tell anybody that, my gosh, I'm withdrawing, and then you're on the street, and it just trickles. I can't even imagine. And so we as the staff know that we don't know anyone's journey, and as volunteers, even our volunteers come because they want to cuddle babies. And when you ask a volunteer, any of our volunteers, what's the best part of Hushabye, they will tell you talking with the parents, hearing their journeys, building them up, and making them feel worthy.
Yes. Yeah. And so often, in the place of the parents or the person who is either in withdrawals or going through, trying to get into early recovery, like so often you just want to be able to talk to and listen and have somebody listen to you that has been there before. So it's incredible work that you're doing. I had kind of two final questions here. So one interesting thing about this podcast and I guess this body of work with Chapter 3 Stigma is that the target audience has changed quite a bit. So I started this and largely continue this practice. When I do a podcast episode, I am actually thinking about myself in the depths of withdrawal and just the things that I wanted or needed to hear but couldn't find, and making that connection. However, the audience has expanded to really loved ones of addicts, because oftentimes there's a barrier that gets erected between the loved one that they care for who is struggling with addiction and their own ability to understand. I mean, loved ones, and I can speak from experience in my own family and with friends, like they want to grab you and just shake you and go, how can I help you? I want you to be better. I love you, but things are not improving. And so this has kind of created a way for them to connect with and see the thought patterns and struggles and behaviors that their loved ones are going through. And so, from your perspective with the work that you do you have any advice for how loved ones and family can support, a couple or a mother who are dealing with addiction and NAS?
I have so many stories of, us. We do groups with our moms and dads prenatally and, prepare them for this. And many are estranged from their families. And because, they've stolen from them, they've, been dangerous when they're under the influence. I mean, they've made bad choices. And parents are, families have to tough love, do whatever. I can't imagine being in that situation, but substance use breaks families. And I always tell families that, what, you've done what you can do right now, and you cannot change them if they're not ready. But know that there are different modes of treatment that you just have to find what works for them. having families understand that it's a brain disease. It's not that they're awful people, that they just haven't met the right person at the right time with the right resources to be able to go, yep, we're going to act on this, and we're going to not judge, and we're going to work through every barrier possible. And that's what we're able to do. My one peer support that I said is a peer, her peer now works for us also. When I met her, she was new on methadone, and she lets me share her story. So, but she was new on methadone, she's a feisty little mama, and she was pregnant, and she ended up telling me that, if we don't get our ducks in a row, there's no family support for us. Baby will go to foster care. She had placed a baby for adoption prior. She's like, we're screwed. We don't have anyone that could stick up for us. And I'm like, what about your mom? She's like, no. What about your dad? No. She's like, there's nobody. And so while we were working with prenatally, we were working. We're like, okay, we need to get you in a home nursing visiting. We need all of these things and all of the resources so that we can prove to Department of Child Safety that the best place for your baby is with you. And she ended up delivering. She stayed well the entire pregnancy, still knock on wood as well. And she ended up delivering and had complications. She did of C-section and was not doing well at all. And her boyfriend, baby daddy, calls me and he's like, she's not doing good. And I'm like, you have to call her mom. And he's like, she doesn't want to know. I'm like, she's a mom. She wants to know. I can guarantee you. And he called and she ran, got to the hospital. And she said that she shares her story. She goes, babe, mom, not grandma, mom ended up, coming through and doing okay. And in the next 5 days, that grandma was there because she was worried about her daughter, had met her granddaughter. And she watched how well they were. And she watched and listened to Clarissa call me and say, okay, she's doing this, and saw them advocate for their daughter. And that grandma is now our biggest cheerleader and one of our volunteers.
I love it.
Shares her story and says, we never thought she would get well. Clarissa asked me her parents divorced, probably a little bit of substance use. You figure the dynamics of having someone that struggles probably did a toll on it. I'm not saying that's the whole reason, but they're divorced. And later on, she's like, will you talk to my dad? And I'm like, I'll talk to him. I'm like, I'll tell him, the data, the stats, the science behind addiction, all of those things. And so I talked to him. He called and he's from out of state. And I'm like, Clarissa's different. She's on this medication. He's like, yeah, but it's a drug for a drug addiction. It's, all the stigma, blah, blah, blah. Yep. And by the end of the call, it was a long call. I would say hour and a half. He's crying.
Wow.
And he's like, well, my ex-wife says that she's better. And, he was just going, can he trust it? What can I do? Whatever. Yep. So I call Clarissa afterwards and I'm like, I talked to him. I go, he's bawling. She goes, my dad was crying. And I'm like, I go, yeah. And she's like, yeah, I've never seen him cry. He doesn't cry.
Wow.
I said, well, he was crying like a baby. Wow. He obviously loves you. And they're all, they're unified. They spend the holidays together. They come and visit. And so I think for families to know, maybe you can't do it right now, but try.
That's incredible.
Give them grace, tell them you love them, and give them more grace. And understand that it's not them, it's the substance that is causing this. And when they say naughty words, when they say, when they steal from you, it's the drug or the substance that's doing it. It's not them. I have never met a mom or dad that doesn't love their baby. I've met so many moms or dads that they're not well enough to love their baby, meaning they can't get well, but they love their baby. And so I guess that's what I always say never now, because I'm like, challenge accepted.
I love that. It's incredible. You and Hushabye are doing such meaningful and purposeful work. Would you have any asks for the listeners, or if anyone is interested on like, how can I help out? Is there anywhere that you would direct them?
Yeah, the most simple thing is when you put this on social media that they tag it and they say, this is absolutely worth a listen. That's number one, because we have to change the stigma. If we don't change stigma, we're screwed. Sorry, that wasn't appropriate, but we're not going to make an impact. So we have to change that. So sharing it and when they listen, sharing just a little portion in their discussions, when they're at dinner, when they're explaining, stuff, start investigating, start asking questions. Know that when you see somebody on the street that is panhandling, there's somebody's son, somebody's daughter. I'm not saying you have to give them money, but you can give them a wave. You can pray for them. They're someone's family member. And, that's hard to do. It is hard to do, but know that there are people in need and to do that. And then, lastly, we're a nonprofit. If you have the resources, $1 makes a huge difference. Our website, hushabyenursery.org, HUSHABYE, nursery, NURSERY, .org. We have a budget of 6.3 million and we fundraise for more than half of them. So
that's awesome.
Policy changes for us to be able to reimburse. We have to just keep going. We're scrappy. I beg everybody.
So. No, that's what you have to do. One other thing I wanted to call out and just kind of confirm. I think it was on your website. I found a list of Amazon items that you can purchase and order, and it'll ship directly to Hushabye. I sent it to my wife this morning. We are looking at picking out a few items because I mean, what a beautiful gift. As new parents, you always know and can think of those tiny details that you forget or don't think about. And man, to be able to put your child in a swaddle or a cute onesie, like that's meaningful. And so what was on your website, right?
Yeah. And it's great. That's what we need. Yes. Diapers. If you're a diaper drive person, do a diaper drive. They can send them all to us. We go through about 8 boxes, so a week. Wow. And diapers are not reimbursed by insurance. They're expensive. So, that's always simple. For anybody that lives in the Phoenix area that's listening, we take gently used baby items. So, babies don't run out of their newborn clothes. We take those and we'll all purpose them, but just drop them by. And amazing. We will definitely put them to use.
That's awesome. I do have a few friends in the Phoenix area. I'll be sending this to them and having them distribute it just within their network. So Tara, thank you so much for the time, the honest conversation, and just your dedication and passion is incredible. Knowing that there's people out there in the world like yourself doing this work is incredibly encouraging.
And I would say ditto to that.
Thank you.
What you're doing and having a voice, that's how we're going to change the world.
It is. So, one conversation at a time.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much for your time. All the best. Okay.
You as well.
Have a good one. Take care.
If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with others who might find it impactful. And give us a rating through your streaming platform of choice. Ratings and comments help spread the work to others who are desperately searching for a solution This simple action could have profound impacts on the lives of others. My hope is that my story can help those who feel alone in their struggles with addiction or any other aspects of life. You can follow us on social media at Chapter 3 Stigma on Instagram and YouTube. If you want to reach out with a message through one of those channels, I will respond and let you know that you are not alone. All the best, you are loved, and know that this life is full of abundant joy and wonder and is worth every struggle and bit of suffering you must endure. Until next time.